right? Despite what a lot of people will have you believe about this summit. So we had a lot of great conversations with the workers, and now we are building the worker solidarity that we need. Now there are some other people who believe in other options in terms of challenging the establishment. So the point of this panel, we want to resist mainstream establishment narrative. We want to debunk corporate media propaganda and discuss different ways forward outside the electoral system. Now, there are some people who will say our path to change and liberation, and they really believe this, is through the Justice Democrats or the Democratic Party. Jimmy Dore, to get everything started off,
No,
I want to ask you:
no.
do you agree with that? Do you agree with that sentiment? What do you believe is the best route to change? Do you agree with their methods there?
Well, I think, I'll point the finger at people like you because you just don't, you're not voting hard enough. You need to vote harder inside the Democratic Party, and I think we should start a third party, but inside the Democratic Party, that's where it's fun. And I mean, come on, there's everyone agrees that the Justice Democrat experiment, while I supported it when it happened, because my theory was I support progressives anywhere they are. I don't adhere to that theory anymore because I think it's actually, more detrimental to the revolution that's needed. It's that to have progressives inside the Democratic Party because it gives people the false idea that there's somebody inside the Democratic Party fighting for them and that they have a chance through that. And so if they could just disabuse themselves of that notion and realize what Shama Sawant said to me years ago on aggressive progressives. And every year she's proven even more right when she said that the road for progressives inside the Democratic Party leads to a graveyard. And that you're seeing this happen. And even though they have all the power, if they wanted to use it, they won't. And then they tweet about we should use our leverage. Like they literally do that. Is that them just fucking with us? I mean, it seems crazy that they would tweet stuff like that. Hey, anyway. So um, I uh, that's my theory. My theory is, electorally, we need another major party. I don't like to say third party. I just would like to say another major party or a party that has somebody who can poll at 15 to 20% so they could get into the debates and then they could actually sway the conversation. And that's what I think is needed. And what we've tried this experiment. The time is running out. I mean, look what they're not fighting climate, just the whole idea. So Donald Trump was driving off a cliff at 100 miles an hour, and Joe Biden's driving off a cliff at 98 miles an hour. I mean, it's not that much of a difference. So you're like, yeah, but one's less. It's like it still end up off a cliff. It doesn't fucking, I
Hey,
guess
Yep.
you could
Jimmy, I don't
spin
know if
it.
you saw that story. I just saw this yesterday. I covered this on my show where you have the Biden administration that is denying public housing to people because they use marijuana.
Yep.
So he's expanding the drug war. And what happened to the push to fight the homelessness crisis that happened? Remember I wanted to ask Max. Hopefully we get Max Blumenthal in here soon. But remember the whole thing where they was like, we're gonna stand for the homelessness at the Capitol. Where are they now? Now Joe Biden is making people homeless because they smoke weed. What's your take, Jimmy?
So even here in California, so if you want to see what the country would look like if it was run by Democrats, look at California. It's run by 100% Democrats. They have a veto-proof majority. They have a Democratic governor. Look at it. So he's given out fracking permits left and right. Homelessness is out of control. People can't afford to live here. The, so people are, and they got no plans to fix any of it, right? And so Gavin Newsom ran on Medicare for all. Well, where the fuck is it? Well, where's your proposal? Where are you pushing? It's nowhere. You know what he did do? As Joe Biden is denying pot smokers public housing, Gavin Newsom vetoed a bill that had made its way through the Democratic legislature that would protect senior citizens in nursing homes from being evicted. He vetoed it. Yeah, so that was part of what he was doing when he was AWOL.
Didn't he
So that
also, oh, sorry, Jimmy, didn't he also veto ranked choice voting? Because I heard
oh
like that made it to the ballot too, and he stepped in and prevented that.
Oh, you know what? Maybe he did. That kind of stuff flies under the radar, just like what I just told you about. Nobody's going to be talking about that. Jimmy Kimmel's not going to be doing a fucking monologue about Gavin Newsom kicking old people out of nursing homes or Andrew Cuomo killing people in nursing homes, right? It's this crazy culture war. It, uh, that Kamala Harris is super unpopular. She's like less popular than Spiro Agnew. And I saw Jimmy Kimmel do a thing the other night, saying that it's obvious the obvious reasons why she's so unpopular is racism and sexism. And I was like, what the? That's by the way, it's the guy who used to do the Juggies on TV.
It's just funny because Kamala Harris is unpopular with Black people too. So it's just the narratives that they come up with is just ridiculous. They don't really talk to real people. They don't actually talk to people who the majority of people in America do not vote. And you don't hear them
Yes,
talk to these people and ask them like, why are you not voting? They don't want to have them on.
that's right. That's well after every I always like to talk about this because not many people do. In 2016, after Donald Trump won, the New York Times went to barbershops in the black and brown neighborhoods in Milwaukee, and they couldn't figure it out. And it was Milwaukee and Detroit. I can't believe anyway, where Hillary should have done better. And they talked about how of the four people who voted for Barack Obama in this one barbershop, two of them didn't vote and the other two didn't vote for Hillary, and they all had the same reasons. We keep voting Democrat and everything gets worse. It keeps getting worse. We keep getting worse. We elected Barack Obama and everybody went to sleep, and so they don't want to hear that message. They don't want to hear that. And that what they're doing now is amping up racism to just I think uh, uh, to distract everybody and pretending to care about it. That's the thing. Like, when Nancy Pelosi puts on a scarf and takes a knee with Chuck Schumer and they're pretending to care. What did they do? They gave us another police agency and to the tune of funding it to $2 billion. They didn't give us student debt relief. They didn't give us health care. They didn't give us anything, minimum wage. They didn't give us shit. That doesn't, you want to help black and brown people? Let's give everybody a living wage, free education, and health care. That would do more to help people than anything else. And they're not, what they want to do is give you a Juneteenth holiday and put out a scarf and give you a kneel. And so again,
I felt truly represented, Jimmy. When I saw that kente cloth, it really spoke to me. It really.
So that to me, I can't. It's all identity politics now. It's all symbolism, and it's just like, hey, do you want to be oppressed by the Republican Party or you want to be oppressed by the Democratic Party? And that's really the difference. They're both your oppressors, and I think that's why they amp up so much. They want to talk about January 6th over and over, and it's because they want us to divide. They want us to hate our neighbor. That's why they're using COVID and mandates to get us to look at each other as as Noam Chomsky said, these people are unvaccinated, want to kill us. And now we know just how crazy that is, because study after study keeps showing that the vaccines don't stop you from transmitting the virus and they don't stop you from getting it. So this idea that and by the way, we're also all going to get it. So if we're all going to get it, who do you give a shit who you get it from? It's never going away ever. Just like the other coronaviruses that are flus that are seasonal, this also is never going away. And the adult people catch the flu twice every decade. And so if you live another 10 years, you're going to get coronavirus. So you should prepare for it. And we're not telling people that. But they have these mandates that make no scientific sense. And then they also split workers and they make us. Let me tell you something. 200,000 people more would be alive right now if we had Medicare for all. And that's who we need to keep our eye on. The oligarchs who are denying us health care. But they want, and if you find yourself blaming a school bus driver or a nurse's aide or a teacher for this coronavirus pandemic and your economic destruction because of the lockdowns, then you've been propagandized. and you need to get your head out of your ass, because those are not your enemy. Your enemy are the people who are keeping you from a living wage, people who are locking you down and not paying your salary like the rest of the Western world did. Keep our they want us to take our eye off the ball, which is the oligarchs. So I'm not going to take my eye off the oligarchs who are denying us everything right now. And it doesn't matter which party's in power. Keep your eye on the oligarchs because they control both parties. It's one party with two right wings.
They're not telling the truth about the labor movement either. And I can tell you guys from my own personal experience, a lot of like mainstream media is telling people that people don't want to work. We have all these vacant jobs and they can't fill them. From my own personal experience, even at my current employer, let me tell you what they're doing with these positions. When someone quits, they're removing that staff line, they're eliminating it, and they're taking that person's workload and dumping it on the people who are left. We've all been going through it. My friends have been going through it as well. So now the people who are left are overworked and they get burned out and then they quit. We're down to 2 people now where I work. We're down to 2 people. We have 1 person left in our IT department. So they're not telling you that part of it. And this started before COVID. This started 2.5 years ago because they wanted to find ways to save money. Meanwhile, and I work at a university, meanwhile, the deans are making 6 figures and the presidents of some of these universities are making millions of dollars. This is the thing about capitalism. They continue to exploit the people at the bottom, and mainstream media is not telling you that, and local news here is not telling you that.
No, oh,
Oh,
definitely. Look, yeah, no, I mean, look, local news. I don't think you could do a worse job if you're trying to do local news. Worse, I don't know. Everywhere I've been, it's just ridiculous. It's just, hey, there was a robbery over here. Here's some more poor people stealing poor stuff from other poor people. Here's some poor people shooting some more poor people. That's what the goddamn news is. And hey, now here's sports and the weather. And now everybody has a weather app. They don't need the fucking local news anymore because that's the only reason people used to watch it was for the goddamn weather. But now everybody has a weather app, so nobody's really watching the local news. Anyway, I don't know. I went off on a tangent, but yeah. So that's you see it happening. You see them splitting, and now I just saw Gene Simmons, who I'm pretty sure was a big Trump supporter, come out just yesterday. It was trending on Twitter that he said that the unvaccinated are our enemies or something like that. Some crazy over the top rhetoric, and so now the shit libs are going to love him, right? But it's just like how they embrace Bill Kristol because he doesn't like Trump, stuff like that. And it's just and David Frum, war criminals. It's just and by they're all fucking war anyway. So you know, Fred Hampton, I talked about. It's good to do all kinds of stuff like uh, have health clinics and food banks and your credit unions, and those are necessary. And he talked about which I never thought of it. He talked about the importance of education um, about the real politics and what because if you don't educate people, then what you're going to have is instead of colonialism, you have black neocolonialism. The black guy will just become the oppressor, and he gave examples of it happening around the world at that time. And he said, so you got to have people got to know the reason why they're doing what they're doing and what it means. And so uh I'm somebody who needs to be educated just as much as anybody else. So I think that's the thing. Like you have to teach people about how capitalism is actually the cause here, and it's unbridled capitalism, and that worker co-ops don't mean communism, but worker co-ops are a way to have the workers have a little bit more control, as Professor Wolf, explained on my show. Then a capitalist can just decide to take the economic base out from underneath the entire community and move it to another country because he's going to make a couple more nickels, right? And now that's no way to run a country. I don't think. I don't think that's any way to run an economy either. So I think it's good to, kind of focus on that message of education of what we're actually living under, who's actually being exploited. And so we can't, you know, uh, not to, again, not that racism isn't a real thing. Of course it is. Uh, but to the establishment has learned how to use that to distract us and turn us into hating each other again. Again, the person who's oppressing me isn't half the country who are workers, right? That's not who's oppressing anybody, right? They're also being oppressed. They're also, those people they want you to hate are also the victims of this system. And they're also the people treading water. They're also the people who go bankrupt when they get sick. They're also the people swimming under mountains of student debt. They're also the people living in food deserts. They're also people being locked up. So that's not, again, that's the whole. And then of course the oligarchs own the media. There's only 6 goddamn companies that run all the media. Thanks Bill Clinton. And so that's the narrative, and people think that's just the way everything is. And I remember I came up when I started my show. I used to have to always explain that people used to equate capitalism with democracy. Well, look, they have a now over in Iraq. They have look, they got McDonald's and shit. Like that doesn't mean they have democracy, right? That means they have capitalism, right? They have that in China too. It's so anyway. I don't know.
I just want to add this because I mentioned the same thing while I was talking to you on your show before. Why I don't get mad at people who are unvaccinated or who have personal disagreements on the personal choice on how they want to deal with the health, because they're not the ones I am going after. Like if we had a competent ruling class, if we had a competent system that actually took care of their neighbors, if we had an actual legit education system, maybe people will make better decisions for themselves. And you also mentioned a great thing that I want to add on to as well, how and they actually been very successful at this, unfortunately, where they turned this whole COVID-19 thing to a culture war, where now people hating unvaccinated people, right? Instead of the ruling class that gave trillions of dollars to billionaires, instead of the rich that siphoned and waged a class war against the working class in the middle of a pandemic. You guys know Joe Biden illegally cut unemployment benefits in order to rob you of your negotiation power with employers. Like all these decisions they make is not by accident. Now, another thing I want to touch, because I think this all connects as well. I mentioned the homelessness crisis, right? And this is why at Fred Hampton Leftists, we always mention class is race, right? And what the Democratic Party did is unforgivable because they bastardized any discussion around legitimate identity politics. Let me give you guys an example. 40% of this country is homeless. I'm sorry, 40% of the homelessness this country is Black. 40%, despite us being 13% of the population, we are 40% of the homelessness population, right? So when you look at LA, when you look at NY and New York, and you see how the Democratic Party responds to the homelessness crisis, that is anti-Black policy.
Yep.
When you look at how the fact that Black people are more likely to have medical debt than any other race, this is the connection between class and race. So if you are against healthcare, if you're against Medicare for all, you cannot say you're pro-Black. This is my position. And if you are attacking workers and demanding that they should be put out of work, you cannot say you class conscious. This is what Richard Wolff was saying. And this is why I want people to understand. And it's easy to be like, poo-poo identity politics. And I want to tell you guys, the reason you are doing that is because of the Democratic Party. Because the Democratic Party will tell you proper application of identity politics is having Kamala Harris as vice president. Having Eric Adams as the mayor in New York City, where they are literally sicking the police on homeless encampments. Oh, I'm so happy to have a Black mayor in New York that's busting up homeless encampments with the police. That's their application of identity politics. So to me, honestly, it kind of makes sense when I see people see that bastardized version of identity politics and they immediately repelled, right? But I actually had a conversation with people who are conservative minded. Well, I bring up the fact that the military pollutes the Black community, right? The fact that we are 40% of the homeless population. So our water is being poisoned, Flint water crisis. When I bring up that stuff, is that, oh my God, you bring up identity politics? No, that brings up the reality of policy and how government action actually negatively affects our lives. This is the reality of identity politics. And what the Democratic Party did by muddying the waters on that issue is unforgivable because they actually set back race relations a long time for a long while doing that. And there's election in Virginia. So I'll pass it right to you guys. I'll pass it to Savvy. But the Democrats And they tricked a lot of MAGA and Republican people into thinking that Terry McAuliffe and Joe Biden is the representative of critical race theory. How they do that, Jimmy? Guys, think about this. Critical race theory is simply thinking critically about race. That's it. It's about applying the class, applying historical events, and thinking about how that affects people right now, right? Now, considering if you actually know what critical race theory is, how could anyone fall for the idea that Terry McAuliffe, a guy who doesn't even support any qualified immunity, he supports the police state, he supports civil asset forfeiture that steals our wealth. So how did conservatives, how did people get tricked into thinking he's the representative of critical race theory? Sab, you have any thoughts? I'm gonna cut myself off there.
Yeah, no, you're good, Nick.
Well, it's just.
Go ahead, Jimmy.
No, it's just crazy that they can make people think, I watch Fox News sometimes and they make Joe Biden out to be a lefty and a socialist. And it's like, oh, so that's why that's how you know it's just one party. It's they all doing the same shit. They're putting a tax cut in for millionaires again in this goddamn bill that they're passing. And so Joe Biden gives a tax cut to people while screwing the workers. Donald Trump gives a tax cut to millionaires while screwing the worker. And they ramp up the military budget under Donald Trump. They ramp up the military budget under Joe Biden. That's just the way it is. It doesn't matter. And that's what people have to catch on to. And all this shit of we should hate again that we should hate members of another political workers in another political party instead of the oligarchs that control both of them. That's a real good trick, and they're pulling it off.
And they're using people like Barack Obama to do it. He's a tool. He was just at a summit. I don't know if you saw this, Jimmy, but he was just at a climate summit telling young people that if they want to put pressure on the government, basically they have to vote harder. But every time we tried to put pressure on the government, Barack Obama was the one who stepped in to stop it. He did it with the NBA strike, Black Lives Matter. He did it with defunding the police. Every time we try to do that, and then now he's blaming the voters. But he is he's a tool. He's just someone that they use to keep us in the Democratic Party.
Exactly right. That's exactly just like they use AOC and the squad to get people to vote Democrat. They're just the sheepdogger, whatever that term is. That's what they're doing. They're taking the progressive revolutionary energy that actually exists in the country, and they're funneling it back into a pro-Wall Street, pro-war, anti-worker party. And that pro-Wall Street, pro-war, anti-worker party, which is what the Democratic Party is. So quit patting yourself on the back for voting for that shit.
That's such a great point, Jimmy, because we get this question. I know people always badger you about this. They say, why are you so focused on criticizing Bernie, AOC, and the squad? Don't you got worse people to criticize? Sabby get this a lot as well. And Jimmy just explained to you guys the concept and why we do that. And I explained this on the stream yesterday. People often get mistaken when they say Nancy Pelosi, Joe Biden, and Hillary Clinton are the white moderates that MLK and Malcolm X warned us about. You're mistaken because they're not moderates.
Yes.
There are extreme right-wingers. Joe Biden is a racist, Zionist, segregationist that is escalating the drug war. And there's still a lot of people have to deal with the fact that they voted for that. And they're coping in a lot of different ways. You voted for blue Trump, guys. So the idea that you guys support this right-wing party, but you can gatekeep and tell other people if they're leftists, right? That doesn't make sense. To me, that doesn't make sense to me, right? So what the progressives do, and once again, I brought the homelessness crisis because I want to get back to like what Jimmy said. The progressives, they give you the illusion that they're fighting the establishment. So Joe Biden, Nancy Pelosi, Hillary Clinton, they're not the white moderate. They're the right wingers that we have to defeat. Period. So who are the white moderates? This is gonna hurt some feelings.
Here we go.
But Bernie Sanders is that guy. Because what the progressives do, remember that army they mobilized to fight the homelessness crisis? And then they left. Like, where's Cory Bush on that issue? So they killed the revolutionary action that was going towards the homelessness crisis. So that's what they do. They siphoned revolutionary spirit, just like Jimmy Dore explained. And I want to get Sabby and Jimmy right back in here on this. But this is why, and I want to talk about why we advocate for striking, a general strike. If we all admit that the homelessness crisis will not be ended through electoral politics, right? We all know that the Democratic Party is the party of homelessness. Then what are our alternatives? And I'm legitimately asking that. If your answer to that is don't hold a general strike, do not shut things down, that means you're okay with that problem continuing. Right? So when I see us funding Israel and funding the apartheid state in Israel, when I see that we are expanding the kids in cages, when I see the police continue to kill our people, these are the kind of things where I don't want to set a 20-year plan to stop. I would love to try to shut things down so we can stop it right now, because 68,000 Americans die each year because we don't have Medicare for all. And AOC said she has a 20-year plan for that. So guys, I'm not a mathematician, but take that number and multiply it by 20. That's how many people AOC is allowing to die because she don't want you to leave the Democratic Party. Hopefully I cleared that up. Sabby, Jimmy, thoughts?
I just want to say the Dems also destroyed the Me Too movement, because Tara Reid was on here last night, and I was thinking to myself that, like, I remember Alyssa Milano and Stacey Abrams coming out against Tara Reid. I believe Joe Biden. Me too, but I believe Joe Biden. And I had to ask myself, if it was a Republican that was accused of doing that to Tara Reid, what would their response be then? So is it really that you believe women, or it's only that you believe women when it's not connected to your party? So this is a problem. And the fact that they came in and jumped in to smear Tara Reid is just incredibly disappointing. And I see people like Stacey Abrams, who the Democratic Party really propped up with identity politics. They really told us that, like, oh, guys, Georgia could have a black female governor. And people bought into that. But listen to the things that Stacey Abrams is trying to tell you. She said, yeah, I believe Me Too, but I believe Joe Biden.
AOC casted doubt publicly on Tara Reid and her accusations, by the way. If you guys think I'm being too hard, if you guys think I'm being too hard on these people, oh, you said Bernie the white moderate? Oh my God. All right, so you can tell people getting mad at that. Bernie Sanders disagreed with the defund the police movement.
Yep.
And I just explained to you how our fascist police system siphons wealth from our community. But he don't want to support the defund the police movement, even though we are factually right. If you look at our police budgets, that'd be the number 3 ranked military in the world. The NYPD spends 3 times more on their police budgets than North Korea does on their military. Bernie Sanders claims he wants to end the drug war, right? And I want to get Jimmy right back in here. But Bernie Sanders claims he wants to end the drug war, right? You guys understand that the reason why we have our giant police budgets in the first place is because we escalated the drug war in the 80s? So Bernie Sanders, how does it make sense that you want to legalize marijuana, but you don't want to decrease the police budgets? Can someone explain to me, how does that make sense? So Bernie, my question is, where do you want that money to go once you legalize marijuana? Do you want to spend that money on the police cracking homeless encampments? You know, when they was actually arresting indigenous protesters at Line 3, that you know, that issue you never talk about with the corporations dumping and building pipelines on indigenous land? Do you want the money to go to that? When I ask the progressives these questions, they don't have answers because they're deeply unserious, and that's why they're the moderate that MLK was warning about, because they want to slow down progress in order to make, in this situation, the Democratic Party look good. Because they don't want to advocate for what's right in this fascist police system, because that made her Democrats down ballot. You see how they wanted to sell us out for the party? But go ahead, Jimmy.
Yeah. I guess funding right-wing Democrats' campaigns doesn't hurt Democrats down ballot like the AOC does. So when you give money to AOC, she then gives it to right-wing Democrats. And but still, somehow they're the good guys, and somehow we're the bad guys for pointing it out. And people say all the time, "Hey, how come you don't criticize Republicans more?" First of all, Donald Trump was the village idiot, and everybody had that covered. They didn't need me to do it. I did it when it was necessary, and I explained to everybody on my show exactly he's gonna advocate for the billionaire class, just like he did. So and we know we have a right-wing corporatist party. What people think we have is a left-wing a representative of worker party, and we do not have that. So that's what I'm trying. The mission of my show is to try to wake people up to that idea. You've got a whole media structure set up to convince people that there are two parties in this country, that there's one party that gives a shit about you, that there's one party that puts on scarves and kneels down and cares about black lives, even though the guy they tell you to vote for, he was the architect of the for-profit prison system that imprisons black and brown people way over their ratio in the population. So this idea, it's all about what Chris Hedges talked about. They know how to give lips, or no, or Thomas Frank and Listen Liberals. They know how to give lip service to democracy. They give lip service to progressivism and liberalism, and that's all it is. And then they go and do it. I mean, Barack Obama admitted. I have the video I played on my show ad nauseum of him saying, he basically is a moderate Republican. He said if it was 1980s, my policy would be considered moderate Republican. Because you know why? Because they're moderate Republican. Because why? We have two fucking right-wing parties in this country. So that's why it's the mission. And by the way, I didn't help Mitch McConnell get elected. All right. That's why I helped Bernie Sanders get votes. I helped the squad get votes. I helped AOC get votes and get elected. And so that's why I'm supposed to now hold their feet to the fire. And as Lawrence O'Donnell said, the only way you can get a party to your way of thinking is to show that you're willing to not vote for them. And the Democrats, he said, the progressives, we never had to listen to them. When I was working inside the Democratic Party, I never listened to them because they had no place else to go. And so I'm telling people, you have to stop donating to Democrats and you have to stop voting for them for at least one election cycle, because it's just going to keep getting worse. We can't keep doing the same thing over and over. And because that is the definition of insanity. And that's what people who are scared are saying. They got no guts. They got no balls. We got to be able to stand up against the oligarchy because they're squashing us anyway. They keep, again, identity politics. They've learned how to use everything and the hashtag Me Too movement, right? So they learn to weaponize that in a political way. Instead of it having just to be about what it's supposed to be about, they weaponize it politically, just like they weaponized identity politics. You know, the joke I do in my act, if it was 1860, the Democrats would be bragging about their first transgendered slave owner.
If you want to know how the Democrat Party use identity politics, I explained this many times before. Look at Barack Obama, the first black president; Eric Holder, the first black attorney general; Colin Powell, the first black secretary of state. These are three of the most evil people in recent human history. You see how they use that? We got Max in the house.
That's how the media portray.
One thing I want to say, and I want to pass it to Sabby and Max, because this goes along about why we're having this conversation. Why do we have to build the argument for a general strike? Because I'm gonna try to explain this. The thought that people have that supporting the Democratic Party will lead to substantial change, that dulls the revolutionary spirit that we need for a general strike to occur, or for workers to engage in strikes. What do I mean by this? Our unions have been captured by capitalists. This is why they constantly side with the corporation instead of the worker. They will have in Kellogg, and there are multiple examples of this. There's also, and people will always say, "Oh, you can't have a general strike. It's not possible. It's not possible." Guys, they had a general strike in Colombia this year, going against the neoliberal regime of Ivan Duque. And you guys know how they did that? You guys know how they did, and it was spontaneous. By the way, it took only like a week or two to put together. Which Jimmy, Max, Sabby, what they tell us all the time, you can't have a general strike that come out of nowhere. Colombia did it though. You know how they did it? Because they're fucking communists. They're anti-capitalist. They built an infrastructure that allowed that to be possible with horizontal supports. So we need to start the process to start building that. And the people that are being sheep herded to the Democratic Party who are not supporting the summit, you guys see how they feel about the summit, right? That you see how they feel about general strikes, right? So the Democratic Party don't want this stuff to happen. They want to dull the revolutionary movement. So we have to spend an hour just to simply make the argument on why you shouldn't be supporting them, on why you should look at other alternatives. But sorry, Max, I know we had some issues earlier, but I'm glad to have you on the stream. Also, I don't know exactly what your time is. We can just communicate. I want to make sure that you have time to share your ideas. We also have another panel. It's 4 p.m. Eastern. We're going to talk about resisting the U.S. empire. I don't know how much time you have, but you can stay a little bit longer if you want to make up for the time. But how you doing, Max? I'm glad you're able to join us.
Thanks a lot, Nick. Good to see all of you here. The reason I couldn't come on was I was doing a live stream of my own that was kind of a marathon. At my Rockfin live stream, Foreign Agents, where I'm allowed to like say things. I'm like allowed to speak in consecutive words. YouTube no longer allows me to speak in consecutive words. They have some algorithm that's like programmed against my voice or something, but and you certainly can't support many of the workers who are out there protesting against mandates without having your channel removed. So I don't know what I can really even say here. I don't have a lot of time, but I just wanted to pop my head in and support what you're doing here. I mean, I think, getting this conversation going and just making people understand from a psychological point of view that such a thing is necessary and possible. I mean, it starts here. And it starts with the recognition that there are many strike-like actions taking place, including wildcat style quasi strikes, work slowdowns, demonstrations of massive worker anger and discontent with the current order, the current regime. Some of them chant, "Let's go Brandon," and they're trying to say, "Fuck Joe Biden." But this goes well beyond Joe Biden. I don't even think Joe Biden knows he's even there sometimes. But this really is about a regime. And as long as this present order is still in place and these wildcat strikes are necessary because some of the main unions are just playing the role of liaisons between workers and management and selling workers out over the issues like the mandates. As long as it continues, everything will be funneled back into this failing capitalist system. And that's what we see with AOC, for example, at COP26, taking selfies with Nicola Sturgeon and calling for, more money being pumped from central banks into the financial sector to invest in supposed green technology. It's not going to be anything like a Keynesian New Deal. It will just be more fuel for the failing global capitalist machine. So there has to be a fundamental change. And that's what a general strike is about. General strike is possible and necessary because workers actually have more power now than they've had before because of the tight job market. They have power over the bosses. But I wanted to make one point. It's something me and Jimmy have been talking about. It's partly why Jimmy's getting attacked so much in the past few days, is that we've been saying that you, as a YouTube influencer or as a journalist or as someone who covers workers' struggles or who cares about workers, you have no right to tell them how to protest or what to protest. And if workers are out there, as we've seen across the world, in protests in New York City, where firefighters and EMS workers and teachers and healthcare workers are protesting, or in Morocco, or in Indonesia, or in Iran, or across Italy, which is run by a disgusting former central banker, Mario Draghi, a neoliberal kind of cardboard cutout, or billionaire Emmanuel Macron's France. They're protesting against the state and the boss's right to determine what gets injected into their body. And it will not stop there. And these are protests that are not covered in legacy media. They're not covered in corporate media. So what I'm saying, and what Jimmy's been saying, is we support all the workers out there in the streets who are protesting for their fundamental rights, including bodily autonomy. But as Professor Richard Wolff, who I think is one of the premier socialist academics who's presented a real model for socialist organizing in the US, said on Jimmy Dore's show, was that the fundamental thing about workers' movements and the labor struggle is not letting the boss telling workers what to do. And that's why Richard Wolff is against the mandates. And he got attacked, as we've gotten attacked, just for making that simple, basic quotidian statement. So it doesn't, I don't care, you know, if some of those people out there in those protests have, you know, one of like a thin blue line flag or whatever, or they're chanting, "Let's go Brandon," and you think that's a pro-Trump quote. If they're workers and they're protesting against the boss's right to dominate everything down to their biomedical status, then you have to support them, or it's not your choice. And that's going to be part of a general strike. It absolutely is. You see these protests across every industry. And when Biden's mandate, if a federal court allows it to kick in next year, the resistance is going to be massive. And it, you know, of course, this isn't the essence of the strikes that are taking place. But why I'm focusing on it and why I think it's so important is because the organized left doesn't think these workers have the right to make those protests. They celebrate their firings. You see these phony pseudo-adversarial journalists and YouTube influencers celebrating the firing of people under the mandates. And all it does, along with, you know, passport systems, all it does is give the ruling class more power over workers. And that's what we've seen, this continuous process since a pandemic was declared of just decimating working people and regular people, the lockdowns. If you're out there protesting to cancel the rent, well, why do so many people face eviction right now? One reason is they were locked down. They were put under lockdown in 2020. 200,000 businesses, small businesses were shuttered in state after state across the US. Children lost something like 30 to 40% of their reading comprehension. This was Glenn Youngkin's closing argument in Virginia when he stomped Terry McAuliffe in a blue state. His closing argument wasn't about critical race theory. It was about the school closures, and so many parents related to it. So when the left abandons these parents, when it abandons these workers, the right comes in and it exploits the anger, the legitimate anger and resentment to gain power. So that's what the left is allowing, the organized phony left is allowing to take place right now. And the best thing they can do instead of engaging the substance of this issue is to attack Jimmy Dore and try to nail him on a technicality, but they won't engage on the substance. So that's one of the points I want to make. And then, as Nick was saying before I came on, this is an international struggle, and workers around the world are fighting against US empire. And so we need to consider what they're saying and what they want. And one thing they don't want is to be sanctioned by this regime, because when you sanction countries, and Nicaragua's next on the chopping block, usually these are countries that have socialist or independent governments, countries that where global capitalist forces are yearning to loot their public sector. The sanctions fall on the back of workers, and they cause companies to collapse, workers to become unemployed, and then they're turned to migrants. And in Central or South America, they go north and they wind up at our border. And then they wind up in cages or rounded up, or they're just used as cheap labor in this country, which further weakens working class organization. And the Democrats profit from that just as much as the Republicans. They collaborate on that entire system. So sanctions internationally are something we need to be speaking about and understanding in the course of a general strike, and understanding how people are sanctioned internally in the United States. I think that's pretty much all I have to say right now. I don't know if there's any questions or
I was gonna
anything.
Go ahead, Fabi.
I just want to add to what Max is saying. Like I'm vaccinated. I had to do it for my job in order to keep my job. But for people who are hesitant and are skeptical, I just want to say they have the right to be so, because this is something that is new. Do you know how many times in my lifetime I've seen the FDA recall birth control medications that were new? I can go through a list of them, the patch, the neural plant. So it is new. People have a right to question. People have a right to be skeptical about it. And I don't think people should be shamed for feeling that way. I'll pass it to you, Nick.
Now, I want to get Jimmy in here as well. what I heard from Max and what I heard from Jimmy, sorry, Professor Wolf when he was on Jimmy's show was a powerful left critique of the mandates. And to add on to what Max said, I have not heard a counter argument to that. And I've been looking.
Counter argument is
what they do is they go ahead.
They just say anti-vaxxer and they use pejoratives, and they have no response. And what I've noticed with a large section of the left and the Twitter and YouTube influencers is their critique only focuses on people like Jimmy Dore or the so-called anti-vaxxers or regular people. And they have no critique of power. They have no critique of big pharma. They have no critique of the vaccine itself and why it has failed on so many levels and why the pandemic continues, why the cases are exploding in hyper-vaxxed countries like Israel or Ireland.
Singapore.
They won't allow a critique because any critique is being an anti-vaxxer. So in so many ways, they're either useful idiots or deliberate force multipliers for power, for big pharma, for the Democratic Party, for our feudal masters like Bill Gates. And that's why they exist, because they don't really have very much charisma or very many interesting things to say. And no one cares if they make a slight error because they don't threaten any centers of power. So no one's scrutinizing them.
And one thing I want to say, I want to get Jimmy on this conversation as well, because I was on this show and I was talking about the mandates, and I usually focus on. I just didn't have time to really discuss it, so that was really the first time that I gave my public view on it. And then, like, whenever I saw it, I was like curious. Like, I want to see what the counter argument. It was just literally just like they were just attacking me because what I said on the show, I said if you support the mandates, let's take this further and let's see how class loyal you really are. And let's see how class conscious you are. So let's say there is a single mother with 2 kids who don't want to get a vaccine mandate. And according to a lot of liberals, they believe if you don't want to if you don't get the vaccine, you shouldn't be able to buy groceries. They think you should be denied access to food. So once again, I'm asking people to be serious. So the argument
that's happening in other countries. That is happening in other countries.
Yeah. So my question is, I want to get Max and Jimmy opinion on this. I'm saying if you're on the left and you support this means you support starving a poor family because they don't want to get a vaccine. How can you say you class conscious with that? Once again, that has nothing to do with my statement or my opinion on the vaccine. This is a left class analysis. Like, do you want everyone who don't get the vaccine? So let's take it another step further. Let's say the mandates get implemented, right? Let's say you have your way and someone refused to get the vaccine. What do you think their punishment should be? If you push them and keep pushing them, the response will always be their death. So you're not allowed in grocery stores. So you can't feed your kids? Is that what you want for people who don't take the vaccine? But sorry, Jimmy, Max, you guys want to chime in?
Well, they want to take away their right to support, to have a living, to earn a living. I mean, could there be anything more destructive than that? They want to take away their ability to earn a living. So, that's an assault on workers, and that, that they're also operating under the notion. I think most of the people who are pro-mandate are intentionally being ignorant about the science. They don't want to know about it, and the science is that the vaccine does not stop transmission and it doesn't stop you from getting infected. So if you get a vaccine, if you get vaccinated, it's to protect yourself. That's not to protect anyone else. It doesn't protect anybody else. And if somebody else is afraid of getting COVID, they should go get vaccinated. If you're vulnerable and you think that you need the protection, you should go get it. Because the vaccine only protects the person getting the vaccine. We now know for a fact, a scientific fact, that it does not stop the transmission and it does not stop you from getting infected. And everybody is going to get COVID at some point. No matter how many masks you wear or how many injections you get, you're still going to get COVID. So why do you care if you get it from from a vaccinated person or an unvaccinated person? That doesn't make any sense. It doesn't. And so if you want to get vaccinated, that's your personal choice because the vaccine only protects you. Okay.
Abby, Max,
Yeah,
anything else you
absolutely.
guys want to add?
Yeah, I mean, and that is the critique that you're not allowed to have, but it is what has been stated by everyone from Anthony Fauci to CDC Director Rochelle Walensky to Bill Gates himself, the oligarch who helped develop many of these vaccines. And it obliterates the logic for mandates and reveals that it's simply about flexing the power of the bosses and our ruling masters against workers, demonstrating how much they can get away with, how much they can intimidate them. We see it play out in these public campaigns against Kyrie Irving or Aaron Rodgers, where they're ritually stoned. It's the perfect spark for a general strike, along with everything else workers have to go through, all the drudgery, the humiliation, and the negotiating power that they have in a tight job market. It is absolutely connected to the supply chain crisis and the lack of truckers. Do we want to keep living like this? And why are leftists, like minimizing how inflation affects people? And it's not transitory. People are outraged about it. We should be listening to them and mobilizing with them instead of dismissing it because it hurts Joe Biden. I mean, that's pathetic. So you have just so many ingredients right now for rebellion, for a revolutionary moment, something that's harder to co-opt than occupy. I wouldn't say occupy was co-op, but something harder to suppress than occupy. I see it right over the horizon, but it won't. If workers rise up, it may not be the kind of revolt that a large part of the organized left wants to see. And so we need to see that sector for what it is. It's been a great unmasking over these past 2 years, and we can see who's real and who isn't. And what's real is what people are already out in the streets about.
Well said, Max. Well said. And we are reaching the end of the part 1 of our day 2 of the Jones Strike Summit. And this is the part where I'm trying to let you guys know that it's very important for everyone that's watching this to go to the next stream. We got 2 separate videos we do on the Jones Strike Summit. This just so happened to be the last panel on this one. So that the next panel is going to start in around 10 minutes or so. I put the link on there. Please subscribe. It's in your subscription box. Jones Strike Summit day 2, part 2. I linked it in there. We going over there next after the panel. So that's where the conversation will continue. We are going to have a conversation next on imperialism, race, and the labor movement. We'll have Danny Harfong on with the Jackson Hinkle. We're going to talk about, once again, building an international left movement. That's like something that, once again, we are the Fred Hampton leftists. Now I'll pass it right to you, Max. We are the Fred Hampton leftists, and they were strong supporters of the Palestinian people, supporting the struggle of the apartheid in South Africa. They were always internationally focused, just like Martin Luther King Jr. Yeah. So the left that is not like that, they're leading you off the cliff. So we have to have an international movement. So hopefully we continue to make that argument on the next hour. But I'm not trying to rush you guys off. So I want to give Max Blumenthal and Jimmy Dore another opportunity to speak. And also, I always tell all my guests this: I appreciate your guys' time. If you guys want to join for the next conversation, you guys are free to. Either way, I'm glad you guys joined us. I start with Max, and then we go Jimmy. Any last words?
Yeah, I'm gonna go get outside and get some vitamin D, which you can see I need it very badly. But I wanted to just kind of close with a Fred Hampton story, since this is Fred Hampton leftist, and I learned about it from a book called Government by Gunplay, which was edited many years ago by a journalist named Sidney Blumenthal, and it covers the intelligence plot to assassinate Fred Hampton. But there's a story about Fred Hampton that really spoke to me there, where he was confronted in Chicago with a chaotic rally planned by the Weather Underground around the Loop in downtown Chicago, where they were basically getting a bunch of young people into town dressed up in like football helmets with baseball bats to go smash up stores and attack the cops. And Fred Hampton stood before the crowd and said, "We don't need anarchism. This is going to be a disaster. What we need is political education." And it really reminds me that we're in a protracted struggle, and that sometimes our own rage can be used against us by more powerful forces, as we saw kind of with the flame out of some of the protests in 2020. And I think what Fred Hampton was committed to was the protracted struggle to political education, with providing people with actually a basis for transforming society and not just reacting. So I just wanted to close with that.
Thank you for coming on once again, Max. Always good to talk with you. Jimmy, any last words, any last thoughts? Once again, thank you for coming on
Well,
and talking with us. Go ahead.
the white moderates that were the problem before me is because they were like, "Hey, I agree with you, but just wait." Right? That's what they were saying. I agree with what you want to do, but just wait, not now. And so you see those same moderates doing the same thing. Say, "Hey, I agree with the medical, but not now. I agree with $50 minimum wage, but not now. I agree with the reducing military budget, but not now. I agree with student debt relief, but not now. I agree with legalizing marijuana, but not now." So those are the people that are the problem, just as MLK said. And that's why my show focuses on that problem. And we got to keep our eye on the problem, which is the oligarchy and not your neighbor.
Well said. Thanks so much for coming on, guys. This was an awesome panel.
Yeah, sorry.
Thank you.
I was just having some scheduling there. But once again, thanks, Jamie. Thanks, Mac, for having us on.